Welcome to the Anti-Harassment training module developed by Professor Harley's Cells Lab. This is Nagar from the Cells Lab, and in this module we'll talk about identifying and addressing harassment. Let's tackle the first objective, defining harassment. First and foremost, while there are many definitions of harassment, the one we're going with in our module is any unwelcome behavior in the form of repeated or unwanted conduct that affects a person's dignity, psychological or physical integrity, and that results in a harmful environment for that person. First, there may be overlaps in definitions. For example, certain behaviors like actively excluding someone from a conversation is harassment, but it's easy to view it as bullying as well. This is why incidents and behaviors can be labeled with multiple of these words simultaneously. If somebody is being excluded from a conversation constantly because of their group identity or belief, then not only is it harassment and bullying, but also discrimination. Remember that if you feel that you are a victim of any of these, you should seek help. We know our modules mainly deal with harassment, but we also feel that the information in these modules can be applied to these related words as well. While we're talking about related words to harassment, it's worth noting the Office for Respectful Environments, which is responsible for dealing with such issues in the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences, use the word mistreatment. It's defined as disrespectful or unprofessional behavior directed at a learner or a group of learners that has a negative effect on the learner or the learning environment. While we of course acknowledge the use of other terms such as mistreatment, in our module, we'll stick with harassment. Have you ever encountered a situation when somebody was being harassed and you wanted to intervene but didn't? You're not alone if you've experienced something like this. When you experience or witness harassment, you might freeze. Feeling of powerlessness, being afraid of retaliation, not being sure of what even is happening, or why something is happening are all common and understandable reasons for freezing. When witnessing a potential harassment incident, being unsure of what to do in the situation, along with the feeling of someone else can help, can lead to the bystander effect. If everyone thinks that someone else can help, it easily can result in nobody actually helping out in the situation. Knowing what to do as a bystander can be helpful in taking action. We'd like to introduce the 4D strategies, which are distract, delegate, delay, and direct. Let's take an in-depth look at each of these. Let's start with distract. The distract strategy refers to disrupting the people involved. Anything counts that creates a commotion and changes the focus to get the victim out of the situation. If it is appropriate, use humor, questions, excuses, or sudden change of the topic to divert the attention of the perpetrator. This creates an opportunity for the target of the behavior to exit the situation. The second strategy is delegate, where you can try to find an ally or other people to get involved to help take charge of the situation. The person you could reach out to could be supervisors, other employees around senior students, or even your colleagues. The next strategy we have is delay. Often, it may be risky to actively intervene when the harassment is happening. One strategy that you could use during those situations is delay, where you can wait for the threat to pass and then check in with the victim. Ways to check in include asking questions such as, "Can I sit with you?" or "Is it okay if I accompany you somewhere?" You could even send them a private message. Remember that the point is to avoid unsafe or uncomfortable situations and follow up when it is safe. The last strategy we have is direct. The idea of direct is to confront the harmful behavior directly so that the target of the behavior is empowered to leave the situation or the perpetrator can make this choice to stop. This can include stepping in to separate the individuals and using assertive language. Direct intervention can also take the form of asking the targeted person, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" or challenging inappropriate jokes and language by stating your discomfort or disapproval. The point is to question or challenge the harasser, avoid debating and arguing. Here are the takeaway points for the 4D strategies. First, prevent escalation. Escalating the situation should always be avoided if at all possible. Second, continuous support. It's good to be resilient. Even small actions can have big impacts on uplifting the victim. Third, problematize harassment, which will help against normalizing harassment. And lastly, be aware of policies. It's important to be aware of policies and resources, whether the harassment was targeted towards you or someone else. And speaking of policies, let's move on to our third objective, reporting and policies. McGill has clear policies that outline the responsibility of the university and its members. This means the policies apply to students, instructors, staff, and everyone in between. McGill's policies clearly state that there is no room for harassment and discrimination at the university. For more information, you can scan the QR code shown here. You can also go to mcgill.ca. The McGill University Health Center, MUHC, also has a code of ethics that include a section on how harassment is not tolerated. The policy specifically highlights how staff members, patients, and visitors should not have to experience harassment or abuse. Instead, everyone deserves respect. For more information, you can scan the QR code here, or you can go to muhc.ca. Please note that MUHC affiliated hospitals and non-affiliated hospitals, such as the Jewish General Hospital, may have different rules. Whether you've experienced harassment in clinical environments or on campus, these two offices should be your go-to places for finding out more information towards the reporting process. If you're unsure where your experience falls under, you're always welcome to reach out to either one of those offices to at least start getting help. There are many additional resources available that are related to harassment incidents. We highlight 2 additional hubs that can be helpful. The first is the Equity at McGill webpage. There you will find links to resources such as the Student Wellness Hub, Employee and Family Assistance Program, the Office for Sexual Violence Response, Support and Education, and more. The second resource hub is at the Office for Mediation and Reporting. There you will find links to many resources such as Keep Me Safe, local wellness advisors, security services, and more. Now that we've covered the 4D strategies, let's look at applying what we've learned towards example scenarios. Our first scenario begins with you and your co-resident being in an intensive care unit rotation. During the rounds, an attending staff asks your co-resident to complete an ultrasound on the patient to check their urine levels. However, when your co-resident tries to complete the ultrasound, he has trouble identifying the bladder. Despite many attempts, he's unable to gauge the patient's urine level. The staff eventually takes over and then shows the resident how to complete the ultrasound and locate the bladder. However, the staff also berates and personally insults your co-resident in front of other residents and the patient. What can you do as a bystander? One viable strategy we'd like to suggest is delay. Remember, delay is when you check in with the individual who experienced the harassment. So in this case, you can approach your fellow co-resident later and ask if everything is okay. Let's look at another scenario and see what we can do as a bystander. Last month, your co-resident overlooked a patient's sodium levels, resulting in the patient's operation being postponed until a cardiologist followed up. A chief resident, whenever around, keeps on mentioning this mistake to your co-worker resident, always emphasizing how such mistakes are unbelievable and a sign of incompetency. The two of you encounter the chief resident at the cafeteria, and the chief resident begins to bring up the mistake from last month. So what would you do as a bystander? One viable strategy we would suggest is distract. If you recall, distract is when we create a commotion in an attempt to get the victim out of the harassment experience. So to create a distraction, you could perhaps abruptly bring up a story to change the topic of the conversation, effectively ending the harassment towards your co-resident. Please note, if you are ever subject to harassment, stay calm and tell the perpetrator to stop. Leave the situation if you or others are concerned about safety, talk to someone you trust, document what happened, and finally report the incident. And that concludes our module. Thank you so much for listening.